Welcome to Canuck of the Dead. We are on the next episode of the Halloween franchise, and this is one I know I have been itching to talk about. And same with my buddy Benner. How you doing, Benner?
Hey, man. Good. Yeah.
Yes.
Back for another.
Yes, and this is one that we have been waiting for.
Yeah, for sure. It's exciting for me because I remember when this film came out, and I think it's very divisive. I think there's lots to talk about on it for sure. But also as well, like this was kind of the first time there was like a real clean restart for the franchise. So yeah, I'm interested. I'm hyped to get into it.
Okay, let's get everyone up to date.
Tonight's brutal murders was described by police as Manson-like in its viciousness. 3 people brutally murdered and a 10-year-old boy being held in custody.
You haven't said a word for 15 years.
This summer, Rob Zombie unleashes a unique vision of a legendary tale.
Listen, be careful tonight. A lot of nutcases come out on Halloween.
Is the boogeyman real? Why are you so obsessed with the boogeyman, Tommy? Halloween night, the boogeyman attacks kids who don't believe.
Oh no, Tommy! Boogeyman's gonna get me!
I'm gonna cut that mask right off your face.
He's come back for his baby sister. To do what?
There we go.
All right. Yeah. I like that trailer, man. Like I remember seeing this trailer coming out because we had all kind of followed it. It was sort of like remake city around that time. Every horror movie under the sun was getting remade. So I remember when this one came out or was being announced, and Rob Zombie was fresh off of Devil's Rejects at the time, sort of. I don't want to say Hollywood's new hottest director. That's not what he was, but there was definitely like the Rob Zombie niche and fandom had kind of followed him and was kind of stoked that he was actually a director as well. So I'm just going to preface this by saying I am wearing my Devil's Rejects t-shirt. So I love
Nice.
Rob Zombie. I love almost everything that he's done. Am a huge White Zombie fan. White Zombie is a huge influence on me musically. Astro Creep 2000 being like one of my favorite albums, probably my top 10 albums of all time. Love his solo stuff as well, not as much as White Zombie, but I always appreciate the aesthetic. So I just want to preface this because it's such a divisive movie, and especially since he kind of had a crack at this sort of iconic IP. And of course, rebooting the entire franchise as well. Pretty daunting task for sure. But I liked how this was shaping up. I was pumped to go see this in the theater. I thought it was going to be dark. I thought it was going to be gritty. And I think that's what the franchise needed at that point.
Yeah, see, I'm with
yeah.
you. I love Rob Zombie, but he is the Will Ferrell of directors, where you either love it or you hate it. You know, there's not usually a gray area when it comes to.
He's got a style, right? Like, so, and that style is going to connect with you and you're going to like it. It's a very visceral style. It's a very violent style. It doesn't always work. And I'm not going to give the guy a free pass either. I think he knocks some things out of the park, and he deserves to get credit for a big chunk of this movie. There are some things that, I do feel like he's a director that's sort of like he sort of falls into the realm of Tim Burton, Nicholas Refn, like those directors that I feel when they're sort of let off the leash and they can do whatever they want, they sort of go a bit batshit crazy. And I feel like once if they have if they're kept in the lane, if they have if they put the blinders on a little bit, I feel that they make better movies. And that's very challenging for a lot of people who love those directors. I always get in arguments and debates with people just because, it's obviously you're limiting the creative freedom. But ultimately, I think like the goal is to make a really great movie and the best movie you possibly can. And I feel like Rob Zombie sometimes gets a little too crazy when he's kind of allowed to do whatever he wants. And I think, speaking of this film, obviously there's the theatrical cut, which I saw in the theater and most people saw in the theater. And then there's obviously the director's cut, which is available on most of the box sets that came out with Scream Factory. Both of them, both the 10 disc and the larger box, only have the director's cut. It doesn't have the theatrical cut for some weird reason. And I think the only way that you can grab it in Canada is that there's a split Blu-ray. I should have grabbed it just so I could show it, but it's a split Blu-ray, which is Rob Zombie's Halloween 1 and 2, but just the theatrical cuts, and that's the one to get, and we'll get into that as well. Yeah.
Actually, no, I have both Blu-rays, and they're both regular and director's cut, or unrated, they're called. Sorry.
So the unrated ones are the director's cut.
Yeah.
And I believe the one on Netflix right now, I believe that the Halloween 1, Rob Zombie's Halloween 1, I believe the one on Netflix right now, I think that's the theatrical as well. So
it is the theatrical.
Yeah. So and we'll get into that and talk about why why I feel that way, at least. Yeah.
And it's interesting because I think one of the things that caused the divisiveness in this film was that opening, which was actually, and I come to find out, based on a clip from the television version of the original Halloween. I've never seen it, but apparently the televised version didn't have enough once they cut it down and started editing. So they had John Carpenter went back and filmed something about Michael in the sanitarium.
Okay, gotcha.
I've never seen it, but apparently that's what Rob Zombie based the opening of this on, was that small clip.
Yeah, I mean, it's I didn't mind the opening shots of Michael Myers as a kid. I thought that I can't remember the kid's name, but yeah, he's serviceable, right? And I actually like the again, like in the director's cut, there's a little bit more of his family being just like, Rob Zombie's his talent is writing the shittiest characters you've ever met in your entire life, and I can appreciate that for sure. There's just sometimes where I'm like, okay, I get it. Like, I don't need to be beaten over that. Like, I never like being beaten over the head with anything when I'm watching a flick. But especially this, it's just like, okay, we get them. We get that these are the shittiest people ever. But I do feel like in the director's cut, and this is the same for his sequel, Halloween 2 as well, which we'll get to in the next episode, but just little things that are peppered throughout that sort of extend scenes and that sort of thing that just make the whole thing seem a little bit more grimy. And I don't know if he needed to go that way. I think he was succeeding. Like that trailer, like, I love the off key version of the iconic, Carpenter music. I like the 70s flair and the aesthetic and the cuts, and like I love all that stuff. I feel like it fits this movie and it feels good as far as what he was trying to do. So I think he kind of overdid it a little bit in the director's cut. And my thought on this, I was going to save this for the end, but I'm going to say it, I think, now, because I think it's a little bit more appropriate, is that I feel like there's a really, really great movie here if you took the director's cut and edited it together with the theatrical cut and added some stuff back in, but excluded some other stuff here and there. I think you'd have a really great flick. And I wish someone would do that. And it's kind of like on a bucket list item for me, I think, is to kind of go through that with someone who can edit and just sort of try and maybe put something together that's super cool, right?
I can see that. Because I know when I first saw it, I'm a huge fan of the supernatural Michael, that 8-year-old boy out on the road, doesn't say a word, and he never says a word through the entire franchise. Mm-hmm. Now you have this chatterbox kid, when I first saw it, it was like, oh, I don't know how I feel about this. But by the end of it, I really got into it because it was a different Michael. It was, grounded, I would say, as a real person as opposed to this supernatural entity.
So yeah, I mean, there's definitely like there's definitely like an idea here of grounding it in reality, making this kid, he's obviously a sociopath, psychopath, but there's exterior sort of events that are obviously influencing him as well, and sort of you get, you are sort of sympathetic to him as a younger boy, and then obviously flipping that around to making him this menacing, monster, evil incarnate as the movie goes on, which I think is hard to do. And I think, Zombie should get a lot of credit for doing that, because I think it was really risky. I mean, I thought like when he gets the mask for the first time is really cool. Like there's lots of really cool shit in this movie that I think does the original a lot of justice. But there's also some stuff that's like maybe not so great. And I think that comes through in the director's cut when you kind of see these little added scenes of like, okay, so this is the shittiest family ever. And but
Yeah.
guess what? There's more. They're even shittier than you would think of, and it's a bit. It just, yeah, for me. Yeah, I mean that's kind of like that's where this film sort of. I think this is where this film loses some people, and why it's such a debatable entry into the franchise.
Well, I know I talked to Tyler a lot about this particular film.
Mhm.
When I had the chance, I talked his ear off for a weekend. And one of the big things that he took it for was the fact that A, Rob Zombie was doing it,
Yeah.
and B, like I said, it was a grounded, it was a realistic look at Michael Myers as a person in this world. And he thought that was a unique twist on it because it's always been that supernatural thing. And he wanted to see the direction that Rob Zombie would take it with his vision.
Yeah, and let's talk about Tyler too, because this is the big selling point for this movie for me. And I hadn't seen it in a long time. So when I kind of watched it recently when we were doing this series, um, I and I think it was because I had just watched I can't remember what sequence I watched these in. No, I had just watched H2O and Resurrection. Um, and then watched these ones after. And I just remember thinking, like, he's so scary in this movie. And I think like The Mask is awesome. This whole series of podcasts that we've done, we've talked about The Mask being a little bit loosey goosey and not really finding that right fit from like even the first movie. And Michael Myers being like scary. And I think both of those things are accomplished in this movie in numerous times. And there's a couple of sequences that are just absolutely fantastic in this film that are really terrifying and deliver on maybe a lot more gore than obviously the original could, but also as well, like really putting characters in jeopardy and really, uh, driving like Michael into this town and having him sort of wreak like actual chaos and destroying families and lives. Like it's pretty, again, Rob Zombie's a visceral director. He's got a style to him. It does feel kind of grindhousey, kind of 70s, but also sort of feels like it's centered in when it was made. So it came out in 2007. So it does feel like kind of a mid 2000s movie, but with the 70s aesthetic. But I will say, like, yeah, Michael Myers in this movie is awesome. Like it's probably one of my favorite incarnations of the character.
Yeah.
When he actually becomes Michael Myers, like when he gets the mask again, I just feel he is this dead um entity that is just relentless, both in his obsession with trying to find Laurie, and also his ability to kind of to cause mayhem and destroy the people that he comes into contact with. I think it's fantastic.
Well, just to go on the mask thing, I love the way they do that too, with the aging, because as a kid, when he uses it that first time, he buries it in the house and
Yeah.
then he goes back and gets it. So now it's worn and it's got all the wrinkles and the latex, degrading. And I think that makes it even scarier, you know.
Yeah, and his presence as the shape, again, and this is kind of where gets a little bit confusing because there's a couple of scenes, there's a couple of quick cuts in the director's cut where he follows Michael Myers follows Laurie home. And that's great too, because there's shots in the original that are like that when he's kind of hiding behind the hedge, and just something about him being in the daylight. You can get away with it just a little bit, like you can't overdo it. But it's very, very unsettling. And there's a couple of scenes in this movie when he's kind of standing outside the school. There's that scene in this remake. And there's in the director's cut, there's a couple scenes where he follows Laurie home from school, which is unsettling as well. And obviously, like, once in the dark, and there's certain scenes where Tyler's really able to kind of come to life as Michael Myers. Like, he's a big dude, and he's intimidating. And that's a thing too, as well, where it's really the first incarnation of the character, maybe since the original, where you're like, I don't know what I would do in that situation. I love thinking about that. This guy's brutal. He seemingly can't be harmed, but he's also a big, imposing presence. Somebody that would be way bigger than the average dude. So his ability to crush your skull or smash you or knife you to death is pretty plausible, right?
Exactly. He has that physical imposingness. I don't think that's a word, but I'm going to use it.
Yeah, sure.
Like
it's your show, man. It's your show. You can say whatever you want.
Imposingness is now a word.
Yeah.
When you had that original, what we call the original trilogy that we like, it was that supernatural. So it's like a Terminator, and you just keep running around. But this, like you said, if you're in this situation, this is a real guy. He is really 6'8", and he is just as wide. And I know there's like in the house with Danielle Harris and stuff like that. It's like, what would I do? How do you get out of these situations?
Yeah,
and terrifying.
Yeah, and also some really good casting in this movie too. Like Danielle Harris, awesome to see her back in the franchise. Obviously, this is kind of her second shot at the franchise after getting ceremoniously dumped in Part 6, or during the development of Part 6, and of course, Scout Taylor Compton. They're great because when they sort of go up with Michael Myers, because Tyler's so huge, like he looks even bigger and more imposing. And there are certain scenes where you see him kind of enact carnage, and there's other scenes too, which I think are great, especially with the I guess we should say, we never said spoilers, but spoilers, everyone, if you haven't seen this movie from 2007. Yeah. but the sequence where Sheriff, there's some certain sequences where Rob Zombie will show kind of an after scene, like the aftermath of this violent attack, where Sheriff Brackett calls the Strode's residence, and everyone in the house is murdered, and it's just kind of like the aftermath. Just really effective filmmaking, really cool scenes, grisly, unsettling, but at the same time you don't necessarily need to see everything. Sometimes I feel like that's when Rob Zombie hits that sort of, he just hits this mark sometimes that works really, really, really well. I think it's the best stuff he's ever done in this movie, as well as others, where he does hold back. I think that's when he's most successful as a filmmaker, where he kind of reins either whether it's characters talking, dialogue, or the visceral nature of the mayhem that he's filming. Like, I feel like some of the stuff, when he reins it in a bit, I feel that's when he's most effective, and that's where it becomes, the whole film together becomes more terrifying, right?
Exactly. Now, you kind of mentioned Sheriff Brackett. Let's talk about this recasting, because the iconic Donald Pleasance as Loomis. As soon as it was announced Rob Zombie was remaking it, the first thing I said is like, who do you get to replace him?
Yeah. There's a lot of interesting casting in this movie. I think a lot of it works, to be honest. I love Malcolm McDowell as Loomis. Now, casting Malcolm McDowell as Loomis and what you get out of as the character of Loomis, two totally different things here. And again, talking about the two versions of the film, I love Malcolm McDowell as an actor. And again, like, I love how Rob Zombie casts the actors that he grew up watching, or these kind of iconic actors that weren't necessarily movie stars, right? But working actors, like of course, like guys like Sid Haig, Bill Moseley, and obviously, who both have bit parts in this movie. But but yeah, Malcolm McDowell I love, and I love Brad Dourif as Sheriff Brackett. I think those are really cool castings. Again, talking about the two versions of the film, Loomis as the character, obviously a completely different version than Donald Pleasance's Loomis. And this is, I think, one of the things that out of the gate people hated, or really kind of despised this film. This was kind of the one thing. But in the director's cut, Loomis's presentation is way more sympathetic. He's fleshed out a bit more, and that's sort of cut down in the theatrical cut. So again, there's things I love about the theatrical cut. There's things I love about the director's cut, and I want to put those two things together. But yeah, I mean, I think Brad Dourif and Malcolm McDowell are serviceable in both of these roles, and I think they're believable. And I thought it was a good take on both the characters. Once you see sort of both versions and you put it together, but I can see people's issues with it as well.
Well, see, I was always a mindset. I love that Malcolm McDowell did not do Dr. Loomis from the original films. He didn't try and replicate what Donald Pleasance did.
Yeah.
I love the fact that he went his own way and Rob Zombie took him a different direction, because to me, that's one of those things that you just don't touch. You don't mess with. It's perfect the way it was,
Yeah. If like Malcolm McDowell had shown up like bald, like,
yeah, exactly. No.
I mean, when you first meet him and he's got the super long hair, I was just like, I wonder if that's just kind of a bit of an inside joke. Right. But, yeah, I mean, Malcolm McDowell's one of the greatest villains ever put on screen. He's always great in everything he's been in. And he's enjoyable to watch. I think he comes across, just because I think it's Malcolm McDowell, he might come across as a little bit more villainous than maybe originally intended. You can see that, but again, it's so weird because you clearly get the sense that this movie was edited down from the director's cut into what we got as the theatrical cut. And the thing that the theatrical cut is, it's weird because Loomis isn't as, like, Malcolm McDowell's Loomis, Dr. Loomis isn't as sympathetic in the theatrical cut as he is in the director's cut, which is kind of an odd thing for them to sort of cut down. And I don't know who's responsible for that. I don't know if I can't imagine it's Rob Zombie, because he loves Malcolm McDowell and has cast him since in various projects. So I'm not quite sure.
My guess, it was probably a time thing with the production company, and the studio wanted it a certain length, and those were the areas they thought they needed to lose. That's my guess.
Yeah. And I think we'd be so the major, let's talk about the biggest difference between these two films, which is the escape scene. And this is, again, one of those things where I love the theatrical. I like the escape scene where he, basically kills all the guards and escapes. Of course, the director's cut has the super grimy rape sequence, which is not Michael Myers raping anybody. Spoiler alert. But but it's tough to watch, and I'm not a big fan of that shit. Like, it's just so, it doesn't make any sense. It is narratively, it feels out of place. And again, I don't know what was filmed first. I'm assuming that the rape sequence was filmed first, and then they went back and they reshot, or maybe they shot two sequences together, or sorry, the two sequences back to back and then picked one in editing. I'm not sure. But again, the theatrical escape scene, of course, if you watch the director's cut, Bill Moseley gets cut out of the film, which is also weird, right? Like, you would think that Rob Zombie would be like, no, let's keep the version that has Bill Moseley in it, right? But
yeah,
I don't know. I don't know the story behind that at all, to be honest. But it's difficult to watch with the director's cut. And again, I don't think it adds anything at all to the character. It doesn't add anything to the movie or the story. And it's sort of, yeah.
Oh, I was gonna say, my guess is you're right. It was filmed first, and then, like, it didn't add anything. It takes the tone way down. And in a dark movie like this, I don't think they could afford that, which is why they probably went back and weird to say, but did the lighter, escape.
Yeah, where more people get murdered. But that's how grimy this scene is. Yeah, it just feels like, I don't mind shocking stuff. I can appreciate that making something that's shocking and is an art form in itself. But kind of whenever I see something that's like, you're just trying to make something shocking, then it's sort of like it loses the shock, and it just becomes something that's not it's not it's not worthy, I guess, of being called that, because it's just someone trying too hard. And I hate saying that, because I feel like when Rob Zombie hits his notes, when he's in that pocket, he's excellent. He's such an excellent director. But it's just a lot of the time he kind of gets out of that pocket, and I don't know if it's self-indulgence or what, or just bad ideas. I have no idea, but I just feel like it's so odd to see both films sometimes. And again, like watching both versions for this particular podcast, it was strange to say, it's so weird that that's in there and this isn't, and these sequences are in there, but these aren't. And it's just an odd, like, even from a time perspective, I get that for sure. There's definitely, but there's certain things that are like, obviously they were cut because they weren't needed, not necessarily for time, and they're added back in. And it's one of the most interesting films to watch, because there are so many kind of small differences that change the flow of the film. A lot of the time the director's cut is like, an extra 3 minutes, and you're sort of, what's different in here? So
yeah, exactly. They added 4 seconds. I honestly think they may have taken that particular scene out too, because it turns Michael almost into a hero for offing these two, scumbags.
Yeah, no, totally. And I don't know if you want that, because I think that ruins the threat that he poses when he shows up, right? Like he's gonna, is he gonna have a change of heart later on with other characters? Like, who knows, right?
Well, not only that, yay, Michael, you just killed him. It's like, oh wait, now I have to boo against you because you're going against Lori, and it makes you conflicted. That's my guess on it, because I know that's what I was thinking when, as soon as that scene started, it's like, and then he wipes him out. It's like, yes. But then,
yeah, and there's little things like there's little things in the movie. Like there's a line from the nurse. So when he's a kid, she says, "Oh, beautiful! What a beautiful baby," and "Oh, not related to you," or something like that. It's like this kind of like this is antagonistic sort of response to Michael's, and that's why he kills the nurse. Whereas in the theatrical cut, I think he just kills her, right? Like he just kills this seemingly innocent nurse, which I think is like, that makes the escape scene more believable. It ties it together more, and that he is a psychopath, and that he just wants to kill because he wants to kill, not necessarily because something sets him off. So again, like, odd choices for both of these cuts in some respects, and some of them good, some of them bad in both versions.
I agree. Well, stick around, because I'm going to talk to Benner about the other alternate scene and about what I think is the most crucial character in this film. We'll be right back.